Hey everybody, welcome into another off-season edition of the Territory Talk podcast, the official podcast of the Florida Panthers, presented as always by Baptist Health, the official sports medicine provider of the Florida Panthers. Doug Plagens, Jameson Olive here with you as always. Going through the off-season, signings to tell you about. We're also going to go through the Panthers' top scorers from this past season, the 24-25 season, a second straight Stanley Cup winning season for the Florida Panthers. Not going to get tired of talking about that, but we're going to go through, I guess, part one of a two-part breakdown here, going through a lot of what the Panthers have been able to accomplish offensively from the perspectives of a lot of individuals.
Yeah, so we're going to go through the forwards here in two parts. Part one now, part two next episode. And then I think defense we can probably fit into one episode, maybe even squeeze goaltending in there. Just we can talk about Bob forever, but he probably fits in there. Yep. So 3 or so episodes coming up here where we just kind of review last year's team. Obviously, Doug, a lot of good things to talk about. But like you said, before we get into that, a couple two-way signings here recently.
Yeah, we need to highlight these because as we've seen, organizational depth has been a key attribute for this Panthers team in recent years, and we talk about it all the time, but if you're going to make runs as deep as what the Panthers have in recent seasons, you need to be able to have those reinforcements you can call upon when you need them. Toby Bjornfoot played games at the NHL level for the Panthers each of the last 2 seasons, and he's back in the fold once again.
Stanley Cup champion 2 years ago, got a day with the Cup, and I love this signing for the Panthers just because on paper you might say, two-way deal, defenseman, moving on, not a factor. But like you said, these guys are a factor for the Panthers because right now on paper he looks probably like the 8th defenseman, that first call-up should they need it, which we know they're going to need it. You always end up needing that 8th defenseman. And he's a guy, like you said, the last 2 years, specifically more so this past season, when he got called up, he was just reliable. You knew what you were going to get out of him. I remember that California trip when he came up. Played with Mika a little bit on the second pair. He was good. He was fine. He's exactly what you need in a call-up. A guy is to come up there and keep things afloat, not to be flashy, not to make waves, but just to get up there and help the team win. And I like what I saw from him. He's still a young guy, former first-round pick. But at this point in his career, I think he is that guy that can just be a guy that can help. And to have a guy with 130-plus NHL games in that position, a guy that's familiar with the team, and that's another thing is Say we're in January again, Panthers need that 8th defenseman. He comes up. He knows pretty much every guy in that room. It's a seamless fit. He knows the system. He knows the guys. He knows the coaching staff. So that's a great luxury to have if you're the Panthers, to have a guy with that kind of experience, that kind of familiarity in that role. And I know the surface level numbers aren't big. He's not a points guy. He's not a goal scorer. But underlying this past year, almost 60% goals for percentage of 5-on-5. So he's making a positive impact out there when he's out there. And I think, I remember back in January talking to Paul about him and kind of the growth he saw from him. And he basically said, his reads have gotten a lot better. He's anticipating things a lot better than he used to, which makes up for any, lack of speed in any area. So the mental game above the shoulders is getting stronger with him, and that comes with experience, obviously. But, a guy that we're not going to be talking about a ton throughout the upcoming season, but a guy that is good to know you have there from a confidence perspective, Doug, and a guy we both like, a great guy to talk to as well, a guy that fits in that room.
I think the biggest thing that you highlighted there are a lot of defensemen who maybe fit that mold, and could you explore other options? Absolutely, defensemen are tough to come by as it is, but when you have a guy that knows the system, knows the room, knows what the coaching staff demands, all those different things, that means a lot. That goes a long way when you need to call somebody up potentially and plug them in on the fly. The old jumping on the moving train. When they have knowledge of the system, I think that goes a long way. So a great signing to bring in a guy who's familiar.
And one other thing, too, is you look ahead to the upcoming season, and maybe Mike Benning takes a leap. Maybe Marek Alscher takes a leap. Maybe Miklas Hovorka takes a leap, and they become a call-up here at some point. But you can't bank on that. You hope for that, but you can't bank on it. No matter what, you know that if you have to call Toby Bjornfoot up at some point in the upcoming season, he's going to be fine. Yeah. So he's not, necessarily the 1A be-all master plan, but he's the most reliable thing you have down there, the guy you can count on when you need it. That being said, you do hope that maybe some of those other prospects or maybe a couple other guys you bring in maybe do find a way to break through and take a leap, but you can't count on it. But you can count on Toby just being steady.
And a lot of things can happen, obviously, between now and the start of the season. Could he break camp with the Panthers? Absolutely, it's entirely possible. Yeah. But if he is with the American Hockey League affiliate, that's a guy that those young guys you mentioned can lean on too, because Toby has some good experience in the National Hockey League. He's at a point now in his career, still a young guy, but he has seen a lot of different things in a young professional career, and a smart player, not a guy who's ever going to hurt you, and you need guys like that in the organization. So good to see Toby Bjornfoot back in the fold for the upcoming season. Another guy whose game is certainly trending in a positive direction, and direct proof of that is that he's got another contract. Vilmer Skoog has signed again, and he's got a two-way contract. He'll be back in the fold with the Panthers organization coming up. And like I said, if you need nothing else, no other evidence to prove that his game is trending in a positive direction, then he's getting another contract.
Yeah, it was a 2-for-1 deal on Swedes on those two-way contracts. That's great. Another Swede coming back to the org. But like you said, a guy that's had an interesting career so far since going pro. That first season with Charlotte, 22 goals in 49 games. Last season, just 9 goals in 72 games. So learning curve, as we'd expect. But you go to the playoffs, helping the Checkers get all the way to the Calder Cup final. 7 points in 18 games, 4 goals. There's more to give. There's more there with him. He's only 26 years old, only has 2 seasons in the pros. So I also like that as just a banking on, growth move for the Panthers. He's a guy where you go into next year, he's a guy that I could see scoring 10 goals or scoring 30 goals. I don't know what he is yet and how that's going to translate, but regardless, you need those guys in their mid-20s to help along the other prospects and also kind of be that bridge between them and some of the older vets as well. So just a good player to have in the A, and a guy that I still, like I said, the jury's out on Vilmer Skoog. I don't know what he's going to be, but he's a guy you definitely want to keep watching and keep seeing what he does become.
Yeah, an important guy to have in the organization. So a couple of signings that we highlighted there. Let's get now into Jameson, as we talked about coming into this. Territory Talk, as always, the official podcast of the Panthers, presented by Baptist Health, the official sports medicine provider of the Florida Panthers. And we mentioned coming in, we were going to highlight the first part of the Panthers forward group, the top 6 scorers.
Yeah, we're going by scoring.
Yes, we're going by scores. We're not going by line. We're not going by anything like that. But it's going to be kind of part 1 of breaking down the forward group, as you talked about, Jameson. We're going to go kind of position by position the next few episodes. But starting things off with the top 6 scorers from the 24-25 Florida Panthers.
And I want to point out one thing, too, is like we said, we're going down the line. This one's going to be many of the stars, the top 6.
Household names.
Episode 2 is more, still stars, but more meat and potatoes in terms of just the roster. That being said, Doug, I think the Panthers have the nicest potatoes out of anyone in the league. Like, their bottom 6 is insane. It's like those fancy potatoes you can get at restaurants, or what are the ones you can get, like the crock pot dish, with like the
fingerling potatoes?
Yeah, maybe a little rosemary on them, or what do they go? Oh, frites. Call them frites.
For a frite.
Yes. They're frites. That's how nice they are. The meat and potatoes for the Panthers. But
there's all meat.
One of the things I'll point out about the group as a whole that was so impressive me this year is obviously no team deeper at forward than the Panthers. I've seen a couple polls recently of preseason polls, like who's got the best team, best offense, best defense. I think NHL.com's been doing them. A couple other people have as well. And a handful of people are picking the Lightning over the Panthers in terms of best offense, which, once again, you have Kucherov. He's going to give you 120-plus points. You have Point. Point, Hagel, those guys
He
are all
scored a ton of goals last year, too. Probably not going to change.
But once again, it's a team game, and no one's deeper than the Panthers. So I think people are voting for the Panthers, but I think regardless, it should be the Cats. But one stat from last year that really stuck out to me, there wasn't a single forward on this team with a goals for percentage, expected goals for percentage, below 50% at 5-on-5 among the team's regular forwards. Every single one of these forwards was making a positive impact at 5-on-5 in terms of expected goals. That's unheard of. That's absurd. There was no weakness. There was no black holes. There was no, we just got to survive when this line's out here to get this other line out here. So we talk about depth, Doug. To me, that's a huge number there to show that everyone was pulling their weight. Everyone was pulling the rope in the same direction. But like you said, it does start at the top. It does start with the big dogs, as big as depth is on this team. And the first one, Doug, Sam Reinhart. Household name at this point across the entire NHL. But 81 points, 39 goals, 42 assists. This past season, 5 shorthanded goals, Mr. Shorthanded. It seems like, obviously, early on in the season in particular, but overall, always a threat out there to score. But also, Doug, second in Selke Trophy voting behind Aleksander Barkov, who we'll also talk about, but really starting to get credit for the defensive side of his game. Paul Maurice always says, smartest player that he knows since Ron Francis. He always drops the comparison. But for me, when I look at Sam Reinhart's season, and we'll get to the playoffs but in a moment, which is obviously a big thing, but his start was so good, Doug. You go back to the beginning of the year, like October, November, he had that 13-game point streak. It was like 11 goals, 19 points. Fastest skater in franchise history to hit 20 points in a season. So he came flying out of the gate this year, Doug. And the funny thing about him is...
Has there been a goalie who's hit 20 points faster? We specified skater. So
Could have been.
Has there been...
Maybe when Bob's 40 and he's just over it all and wants to start setting some other records, maybe he'll go for it. But obviously came flying out of the gate, but 39 goals for him. That's great. He's kind of put himself in that thing now where kind of 30 is his floor now, and his ceilings were around 50 since he had that breakout year the year before. But to me, the crazy thing is leading scorer on the Panthers, 81 points. It really was such a team effort. They didn't have any 90-plus point guy. They didn't have a 100-plus point guy. No one really had, outside of Sam Bennett, who we'll talk to, like set a career high in points this year. It just once again showed you that everyone just is being good all the way to the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens there. But Sam Reinhart, Doug, at the top. Just before we even talk about his playoff numbers, just your thoughts on his season.
Well, illustrates a couple of different things. One, from a team perspective, and this is probably something we'll get to more when we talk about, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but when we talk about the supporting cast maybe coming up in the next part of the breakdown. Even though it's, like you said, there's a lot of meat. Low-carb diet with this Panthers team. Not as many potatoes, not as many starches. But you look at the way this all breaks down, and again, we might talk about it a little bit more in the next episode, but this Panthers team is able to withstand. It's why when a player's been out of the lineup, we've seen them be able to handle it better than a lot of teams. Jameson, you go up and down the league, and there are a lot of teams out there, if they lose the go-to guy, if they lose one of the stars, it gets, even some of the best teams, it gets really wobbly really quickly. And I'm not saying this Panthers team would want to go long stretches without some of their horses in the lineup. They're your horses for a reason, and it's tough it's nearly impossible to try and offset losses if you have key players out. But the Panthers are better equipped to handle it than anybody else in the league is. There are a lot of teams out there. We saw it, look at Tampa Bay's forward group. If they were to lose one of those big guns, the depth gets exposed, or at times lack thereof gets exposed pretty quickly. This Panthers team is equipped to handle being without key guys at times, and we're going to probably highlight that when we get to some of the supporting cast. But it gets back to what you said with Sam Reinhart, 81 points in 79 games, a great season. That's why he's gonna be representing Team Canada at the Olympics. That's why he was on the Four Nations team. He's one of the best two-way players in the game. He also doesn't just feast on the power play. Yeah, he had 30 power play points during the year, but you're going to see that as a theme too as we go down all the names on this list. Everybody still does a majority of their damage at 5-on-5. Yeah. And you can't say that about all the stars in the league either.
He only had, I think, 13 power play goals. The year before he had, 23 or 24. Yep. So that's kind of what got him from the 39 he had
to the 57.
This year to the 57.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it again. The Panthers, there were stretches this season where Sam Reinhart started out hot, but then there'd go 2 weeks where maybe you don't think about Sam too much, but it doesn't matter because you're still winning games and other guys are stepping up. Same thing for the playoffs, Doug. But speaking of the playoffs, 23 points, tied for the team lead, 11 goals. Second to only Sam Bennett during the playoffs in the Panthers. But, of course, as we all know, 4 goals in Game 6 in the Stanley Cup Final against the Edmonton Oilers. All the history there. The year before, of course, had the game winner in Game 7 against the Oilers. He has just become such a clutch guy, but also at the same time just such a guy that's now a part of all these big moments and these big numbers.
I know there was empty netters involved and things like that, but in 2 career Stanley Cup deciding games, he's got 5 goals.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is you and I remember talking about this. We'd get into these big games and these big series, and I'd say, you know what? Like, Sam could come out and have a hat trick tonight, or he could come out and not have any goals whatsoever. Panthers could still win either way. Mm-hmm. They don't need one or the other to win. And that just so happened that in that Game 6, he erupts for the 4 goals. But, Doug, one thing about Sam Reinhart, big picture now, is he's a guy who, you look at his career, he's got 7 more years left on this 8-year deal with the Panthers. He's only 29 years old, turns 30 in early November, if I recall. But he's got 619 points in 775 career games. The last 2 years, 81 points last year. The year before, 94 points. Like we said, that was the 57-goal year. He used to be a guy where you're like, all right, he's a 25-goal, 50 to 60-point guy. Now every year the expectation for Sam Reinhart is he's at least 30 goals. I'd say 30 to 40, and suddenly an 80, 75
point a game guy,
85-point guy, maybe even 90. But he's a guy where, even in the playoffs, 56 points in 76 career playoff games, 32 goals. And you look at the individual accolades. Second now in Selke Trophy voting, 2 cups. He was huge at the Four Nations, got a gold there. The Olympics are coming up. If Canada finds a way to get gold, he's a guy now, Doug, where if he can keep being that 30 to 40 goal guy, 80 to 85 point guy all the way through this contract with the Panthers, Sam Reinhart went from being a nice player to now you're watching his career to see where this goes. Because at the end of it, if he's got all these more accolades, he's already got a lot, but if he keeps getting more accolades, keeps putting up those numbers, when it's all said and done, Sam Reinhart might have a Hall of Fame case suddenly. And that's not something people were talking about 2-3 years ago.
And his game's going to age well.
And of course, we're just projecting.
Yeah, but I do think his game's going to age well. I think that Sam Reinhart near the end of this contract, I think the game he's going to be playing is still going to be a very effective elite level type of game.
And that's one thing we talk about with all the big contracts the Panthers handed out. The best part is none of these guys the Panthers give these big contracts to, because it's not really a part of what they do as a team. None of these guys have a game completely built on raw skill or speed, particularly speed.
When your game's built on speed, that's what goes first.
That ages, yeah. For the Panthers, not the case. And Sam Reinhart, like you said, is going to age very well.
I think his game's going to age well. The other thing, I know Aleksander Barkov is his teammate, but if somebody said, hey, at some point before the end of that contract, do you think Sam Reinhart can get one Selke? I think it's coming. I think at some point. Yeah. I think at some point that happens.
Like you said, the moment you get in the club, people think about you every year. He got in the club 2 years ago. This year he moved up in the club in second. There's going to be a year where him and Barkey have another great year again, and all the voters say, you know what? It's Sam's
and
time.
The deck,
he deserves
I get the deck is stacked a little bit against him being if he's primarily a winger, which he is. I think the award has gone to centers now for so long. I know going back in time, there were wingers that you go back, when Yuri Lettinen was a perennial Selke contender and things like that. There have been wingers who've won the award. It's become somewhat exclusively a center award over the last 15 years or so. But I think that at some point, Sam Reinhart, before the end of that contract, is going to win a Selke trophy.
Yeah. And speaking of Selkes, moving on to number 2 in scoring this past season for the Panthers, Sam Reinhart's line mate, Aleksander Barkov. 71 points, 20 goals, 51 assists in 67 games. 56.5% in the dot. Face-off win percentage is always big. Third Selke trophy, second straight. Also gets the King Clancy for the humanitarian award for all he does for Joe DiMaggio's hospital. Obviously, he donates money there every time he scores, every time he gets an assist in regular season and playoffs. Also gives Joe D's a suite for the staff and the kids every single game. Just on the goals and assists, that number's around $500,000 now he's donated over the last several seasons. So great guy. It's always great when he gets to the hospital because he's just a rock star there and he loves it. But speaking of just on the ice, Doug, Barkey once again, I just think between the regular season and playoffs, and we'll get to some other stats here, but there's no way at this point you look at Barkey and say he's not a top 10 player, clearly, but is he a top 5 player in the NHL? I think if you actually boil it down to what matters, and that's winning hockey games, I don't think you get past, in terms of forwards, I don't think you get past 5 guys before Barkey's on your team. If you're drafting guys you just need to win games, Barkey to me is top 5, easy top 5.
I think that he impacts the game in more different areas on a shift-by-shift basis than anybody else in the National Hockey League. There are other players, if you're asking the common fan out there, there are other names that might get thrown out first. I'm talking common fan at a North American level, not just down here in South Florida. We know Barkov's name's going to get thrown around a lot if you ask Panthers fans down here in South Florida. But if you ask people across North America, I know there are some guys that they play a certain style of game that maybe jumps off the television screen a little bit more. When Connor McDavid gets going, we don't have to tell you this. He can do things with the puck on his stick that nobody's been able to do from a speed perspective in the history of the sport. Nathan McKinnon has that bull in a china shop thing going on. When he just gets going with the puck, he is as explosive as anybody who's ever played the game. That being said, those players, as great as they are, as fast as they are, they can vanish at times. We've seen it happen. You can contain them.
There's a plan for those guys.
You can contain them. And one of the guys who has been able to contain Connor McDavid, for example, on the biggest stage has been Aleksander Barkov. There's nobody in the league who impacts the game more shift to shift. And those the ways that he impacts the game may not always show up on the score sheet the next morning. You have to watch the game to understand it. But Aleksander Barkov impacts the game more shift to shift than anybody else in the league. And if he doesn't miss those 15 games, very well could have led the Panthers in points.
Yeah,
this season.
Without missing those games, he's probably a 90-something point guy. And that's with being the most unselfish player in the league.
And the face-off numbers seems been on an uptick really year by year. At some point, do we think, could he sniff 60% in the circle? I think the only thing that might hold...
In the playoffs, I think he was right around 60.
He was, and for a regular season, that's a tall order. The only thing that could really get in his way in terms of accomplishing that is he's Aleksander Barkov. So generally, he's taking face-offs every night against the other team's probably best defensive centerman, who is usually good at winning faceoffs.
And just a bulk amount of that. I think in the playoffs, he had like 100+ more faceoffs than anyone else in the Panthers. He takes all the big draws. And we always talk about how key those draws are, but I mean, the amount of times that he's won a draw on the power play or won a draw, with the goaltender pulled when it's 6-on-5 for the Panthers, and he wins those big draws that lead to goals. Like, not every faceoff's created equally, and he always seems to win the biggest faceoffs for the Panthers. But you talk about, Barkey and his impact, and I mean, look no further than the past couple seasons of the playoffs. He made Kucherov vanish. He made Panarin vanish. He's done better than anyone against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Austin Matthews.
Those guys still get their points, but he's done a great job, better than anyone against those two. Austin Matthews, he's made vanish. And once again, it's not just him. It's obviously Reinhart's on its line. Verhaeghe does a great job there. Usually he's out there with Forsling and Ekblad. It's a team effort, but he is the straw that stirs the drink for that top defensive kind of approach for the Panthers. And like we said, the Panthers can go into series and they say, these are the guys we're going to make disappear. Everyone else can try and beat us. And Barkey's the guy that makes those guys disappear. Whereas, other teams go into the series for the Panthers and pick your poison because every line is so good, but also there's not an answer for Barkey. The biggest answer you have for Barkey is just that you have a player so good, kind of like McDavid, that Barkey has to spend a lot of effort just doing his best to contain that guy. But he is just so good. He's so, I'd say, generational in what he does. He's a generational talent in what he does. There's not many other Barkeys in the league, if there is even another Barkey. I mean, obviously, a Kopitar is kind of the guy before Barkey, Bergeron. But even those, I just think Barkey, just given his build and just given the length of his stick and just how he looks out there and just I think Barkey's got a higher offensive skill set than both those guys. Obviously, production's production, but just in terms of what he could accomplish and just the ability he has, he's just such a unicorn.
If Barkov decided to throw the whole defensive thing out the window and say, I don't want to win Selkies anymore, he could score 40 a year.
If we wanted to be a lottery team, Barkey could get 120 points probably just messing around out there by himself.
Yeah. So you look at a list of players, Kopitar, Bergeron, Jonathan Taves, Barkov, of the last 15 years. That's really your best two-way centerman list.
Just going to some of the underlying numbers, when he was out there at 5-on-5, Panthers controlled 60.12% of shot attempts. That's a career high for him. That led the team. They also outscored the opposition 41-28. So like we said, the goals are there, but also the goals against are always very low. And, you speak about the offensive numbers, 9-game point streak back in October through November, 17 points in that time during a 9-game point streak. We always say, like, there's a world where Barkey does always break 100 points if he just takes his foot off the gas or if things go a different direction. So just an incredible player. I remember he had that 4-point game in the Global Series in Finland, which was a huge moment. But what a year for Barkey. You sweep the Global Series, you play great, you win the Selke again, you win the King Clancy, you win your second Stanley Cup. I believe the first ever European-born player to captain 2 Stanley Cup champions. So he was already the first Finnish-born last year. All the records, and we talked about Sam Reinhart possibly now being back on a Hall of Fame track if things go well. Barkey's already there.
He's there.
He's already
could
there.
retire tomorrow, and he's there.
He's there.
And I think I've said this for a while, but if you move Barkov back to the blue line and gave him 2 seasons, he's a Norris contender. Give him 2 seasons on the back end, and he's going to be a finalist for the Norris Trophy.
Back-to-back seasons as well with 22 points in the playoffs. So if the Panthers on this upcoming run they make in the upcoming season, if they go all the way again, he's probably got 22 points.
And I'm not trying to start in it. He's not getting moved back to the defense corps. But if they needed him to, I think he'd be the first one to raise his hand and volunteer.
Well, Nico Mikkola told me one time he's a defenseman's best friend, which is great. And Bob, let's not forget, Bobrovsky always says he could play goal too. Maybe Barkey gets to like his age 38 season and he's like, I'm going to try some new things. I'm going to play defense half the season, goal a couple of games.
What if a player said, I'm going to strap the pads on, play a game in net?
Is there a rule against that? I don't think there is.
Don't think there is.
It's just a roster
spot.
Don't
think
Maybe
there
Barkey
is.
does it at the end there.
In baseball, we make a thing out of when you have a guy who plays all 9 positions in a game, and it has happened before. Maybe that'd be hockey's equivalent.
Maybe we get there. Third on the list now, Matthew Tkachuk, Mr. Everything for the Panthers. Mr. Florida Panther at this point, just in terms of the identity of the team. The identity of the Panthers now is the identity of Matthew Tkachuk, and it has been ever since he got here. The no-nonsense, in-your-face attitude that everyone hates outside of South Florida, but has also won 2 Stanley Cups here for the Panthers and makes this team so fun and so exciting to watch and be around every day from our position. But you know, this past year, 57 points, 22 goals, 35 assists, but that's only in 52 games. So once again, a guy that's probably crossing 90 points if he plays the full season, but of course he had the injury at Four Nations, missed about 30 games. But even with that, Doug, 11 power play goals, second on the team to Reinhart's 13. If you give him those 30-plus games back, he's probably got, 10 more goals, easily maybe around 30 to 35 goals on the season. But then, he gets back, of course, in the playoffs, 23 points in the playoffs, tied for the team lead. Also had 7 points, including 3 goals against the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final. He talked about it, Doug, but coming back from that injury, against the Lightning, definitely wasn't there, but had to be a part of that series. He said he had to be out there. And he was still, I thought, pretty effective at times, but got more healthy, got better and better as the playoffs went on. He told us now at clean out 50-50 chance he has to get surgery this offseason to fix, obviously, tore off some stuff around, abdicator or something?
Adductor, I believe, was the...
Also had a hernia. So he was dealing with a lot, and he still played at an extremely high level, which is so impressive. Second, it seems like every year he's playing with something. He's a warrior out there, but for him to do what he did and get better and better with that injury as the playoffs went on, so impressive. And just, like I said, Doug, just a guy that, if he plays 82, he's giving you 90-plus points and 35-ish goals. But regardless, even when the points aren't coming, the amount of attention he draws and kind of how he just orchestrates the offense, especially on the power play when he's behind the net, and what he can do back there with his body and his puck protection and how he can just, thread the needle and pass that puck around. We talk about Sam Reinhart and all the goals he has, particularly from that spot on the power play, especially 2 years ago. Matthew Tkachuk setting up all those goals with his passes from behind the net. So just how the offense flows through Matthew Tkachuk when he's out there. So impressive, Doug. And then, of course, just the X factor of being Matthew Tkachuk and the attention he draws and the chaos he causes.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing, and you can't always quantify it. And we mentioned this with Reinhart as well. But for Matthew Tkachuk, only 23 of his 57 points came on the power play, so he still does a lot of his damage at 5-on-5. Just gets points. He's the guy you look at the score sheet at the end of the night, and you're like, oh, there he is. There's another assist, another goal, another couple of assists. He just gets points. And a stat that is not measurable, not quantifiable, but Matthew Tkachuk disturbs the other team to the point where it sometimes drives them over the edge, off the deep end. He gives the Panthers team this identity, as you said, that they've had the last couple of years, but he gets teams so off there. The Panthers are better at managing chaos within a game than any team in the league, and Matthew Tkachuk is the best in the league at the game within the game. I don't think there's anybody better.
And, what's the emotional intelligence is the term Paul Maurice uses.
And Paul Maurice has talked about this. He just has such a pulse on the game. He knows exactly when a big hit needs to be delivered. He knows exactly when he knows when there needs to be a scrum, when there needs to be a big hit, when something needs to be said on the bench. He just has a knack for knowing the appropriate time for everything to happen within the game. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody with that tuned in to just the shift by shift flow of a game. And
we don't talk about it enough, but just the captaincy of Barkov, him wearing the C and Chucky wearing the A, and Ekblad as well with the A, but the Barkey-Chucky dynamic in terms of leadership is so good.
As good as it gets.
As good. Yep. You can't ask for more than that. Two guys that work in perfect harmony, two guys that lift each other up. Like Matthew Tkachuk's in awe of what Barkov does every day, and Barkey appreciates everything Chucky does so much every day, because a lot of that's not what Barkey does. It's just the perfect combination of leadership, I think. It's another reason, like we said, that things work so well for the Panthers. It's another reason that room is the way it is those two guys. So for Chucky, like I said, it's wait and see on how his season's going to look with that 50-50 in terms of the surgery, which is the last thing he told us at locker cleanout. But one other thing I'll say about Chucky, Doug, is outside of the Panthers breaking through, obviously it was huge this year what he did at the Four Nations, going on Jimmy Fallon after all the times he's been on Pat McAfee. He is I think not the face of the NHL. If the NHL was smart, they'd make him the face. But I think he's doing a good job of getting his face out there, as are the Panthers pushing him out there, because he should be the face of the NHL. And I look
especially in the States.
In the States especially. But like I said, I think he's almost there. Like a lot through his own work and the Panthers' work and him, just being always on TV with how good the Panthers have been really helps. But you look at even just a couple of days ago out in Tahoe at the golf tournament, he's out there hanging out with Jerry Rice, with Trevor Lawrence, with Miles Teller, with Chase Crawford, with Travis Kelce, like going on the Kelce Brothers podcast this year. He's everywhere, and he's now a guy you look at in those groups and you say, oh, that's the Stanley Cup champion. That's Matthew Tkachuk.
And he's built that for himself.
Yes.
That's not the league pushing him anywhere.
Yeah. No, that's the Panthers pushing him and Matthew Tkachuk pushing him himself. But he should be on everything for the NHL, everything they do. He should be out there. Like I said, there's a lot of really talented players in the NHL. Connor McDavid, Connor Bedard, Austin Matthews. There's a lot of talented players. None of them have what Matthew Tkachuk has in terms of how much he flourishes and likes being in front of the camera. He is a great guy to build the league around. Do it. Just do it. What are you waiting for? Like I said, Crosby, Ovechkin, time's almost over. And I still think they're the top two faces of the NHL just because NHL did a great job marketing those guys back in the day with Road to the Winter Classic, and of course just where they were, and of course the rivalry.
They arrived at the perfect time. The league needed them desperately at that point.
And they had great playoff matchups, and it was so good. But there just hasn't been a replacement since those two guys, just in terms of mass appeal. If you ask the average person on the street to name two hockey players, if they name five, two of those five are Ovechkin and Crosby.
Well, one's going to be Gretzky.
So. Current NHL players. But yes, it'll always be Gretzky. But it's almost that time. It's almost the tipping point where those guys are gone. Okay, who are the new guys? And it's, like I said, Tkachuk's got to be right there.
Has to be.
If you're listed in the NHL.
We've talked about it a lot, and we use the phrase sometimes, the guy that you notice on TV, the guy that kind of jumps off the screen at you. When Matthew Tkachuk does something that is otherwise routine, it comes across as more interesting when he does it. There are guys in sports where when they do something routine, some players, you don't notice it, but when that guy does it, you notice it a little bit more. When Bryce Harper gets walked, it just catches your attention a little bit more than somebody else getting walked.
Even like when Chucky gets like a tip and goal in front of the net, when he goes to celebrate, like he'll push through an opponent to get to his celebration. Sometimes just a little shove.
Yep.
It's just like that little kind of playground stuff that is so good and makes it so fun. And like I said, he's a guy where if you love him, it's so fun to love him, and if you hate him, it's so fun to hate him. That's the perfect guy, Doug. That is the guy.
But he also gets on camera.
Not that anyone should hate him because he's the man, but I understand if he's playing your team, you probably hate him.
But when he gets on camera, people, even the most casual hockey fan, pauses to hear what he has to say because you're going to get something interesting. He's interesting when he gets at the podium. He's interesting when the camera's on him, when the mic's in his face, something interesting. He's going to give you a thought-out answer. He's well-spoken on the camera and on the microphone, but he's going to give you something interesting.
And he always compliments the opposition too.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's not like he's just like an ego guy. Like he's actually so good at like being cordial in the media and talking about how great Connor McDavid is, but also talking about how great the Panthers are. So like it's perfect. And also the lineage. Everyone loves Keith Tkachuk's a great guy. And obviously his brother Brady. That's so cool. Like it's all right there on a platter. Just take it.
Yep.
All right.
It's right there.
We've complained enough.
It's right there for a long time to come, too. This isn't something that's going to with an expiration date on it.
We will march on the NHL offices next time we're in New York City for a game and pitch these ideas. But Doug, next up on the list, Mr. Clutch himself, Carter Verhaeghe. 53 points, 20 goals, 33 assists in 81 games. One thing I'll say about Carter, Doug, ever since he's been with the Panthers, fewest amount of games in a season, 76. He's always out there.
Yep, he's available.
And he plays a physical forechecking game. He's always available. Best ability is availability, like we say, and he's always out there. But you look at just the regular season for Carter, and you and I talked about this throughout the season, but obviously numbers down for him based on expectations. He's a guy now where he should, just based on his skill and ability, should be 30 goals every year, just based on what he does, or at least close to 30, but 20 obviously on the low end for him. But he should be 30 goals, 60-ish points. That should be Carter Verhaeghe every year. But you look at this year, 242 shots, still led this team in shots. He was trying. 8.3% shooting percentage. That's well below his career average of 13.4, and that career average is obviously drawn down a bit by his number this year, so let's just say his average before this year probably around 14. So it was just a bad luck year for Carter. There were still some times where he got hot, but more than anything, just a bad luck year. But even in a bad luck year, Doug, 53 points, 20 goals, that's fine. But we know there's more to Carter, and like we said throughout the year, for fans saying, why is Carter cool? We said the moment the lights get bright and the moment the Panthers need him, Doug, he's going to be doing Carter Verhaeghe things that he did in the playoffs.
When the stage is the biggest, there's maybe nobody you'd rather have with a puck on his stick than Carter Verhaeghe, and he was a point-a-game guy in the playoffs. 23 points to go along with a plus 12 in 23 playoff games. So he's made for the playoffs. 2025, Carter Verhaeghe won the Stanley Cup again. Third ring for him. Remember, he had the one with Tampa Bay early on, so he's run out of fingers.
You know, the funny thing is some guys, I feel like it happens more when they retire, but some guys actually build like the whole display of their house, whereas I feel like Carter's definitely more of like the man cave, where like he probably just has all those cups and all that stuff just kind of sitting on some magazines or side tables in like a pretty empty room. Like, I don't think it's probably a regal display. We'll ask him next time he's on. But
because, well, it's getting to be, there's a lot there now.
It's all the Prince of Wales trophies, too. Yep. There's a lot of trophies. He's got a President's Trophy as well. Like, there's a lot of trophies for Carter Verhaeghe.
Then I won the Prince of Wales Trophy. Again. So he's got another one of those. But point a game in the playoffs. And I think that, plain and simple, sums up Carter Verhaeghe. Not to mention the fact, Jameson, you look at some of the numbers. This is a guy, and we've had him on the podcast before, and he's talked about it, the winding road that he kind of took to become an every-night NHLer. And to his credit, he still carries some of that chip on his shoulder. You see him going over video almost every day after practice with Jamie Compon. They're always...
The moment we're in the locker room, he is sitting with Jamie Compon watching video every day.
Every single day, they're going over something. And now, all of a sudden, 302 points in 411 NHL games for a guy that had to fight tooth and nail just to become an every night NHL player. Now you're looking at a guy who's a 300 point and 400 game guy. That's pretty impressive.
He's already got the career that 99% of NHL players would trade their career for, which is crazy.
And it was the team that drafted him. He didn't end up with them. And then the next team to kind of have a chance at Carter Verhaeghe, they let him go. And then Tampa Bay finally seized the opportunity and gave him a chance. And he became a regular, just couldn't get the minutes there. And Bill Zito and company jumped on the opportunity, going back all the way to 2020 now. He's been here for a long time. Easy to forget now how long he's been a Florida Panther, half a decade at this point. But carved out his opportunity, and he's become a star player here in South Florida. He's going to be for a long time, signed through 2033, and putting up big numbers, winning Stanley Cups. And I think Jameson at this point in time, safe to assume, and we could do this as another episode down the road, but I think we're seeing the last guy to wear 23 as a member of the Florida Panthers might be Carter Verhaeghe.
The Michael Jordan of the Florida Panthers. Maybe we'll see. He'll come back wearing the 4-5.
You know who I believe was the first number 23 in Panthers history, and people may not realize this? There was a brief point in time when Bill Lindsay wore number 23 during the expansion year, and then there was a trade. Somebody was moved off the roster. That opened up number 11, and Bill Lindsay ended up with number 11 as a result.
Bill Lindsay touches everything in this organization.
Yes.
There's always a Bill Lindsay fun fact for everything when it comes to the Panthers. But we talk about Mr. Clutch, though, but 3 game-winning goals in the playoffs for Carter, tied for the team lead with Brad Marchand, also had the series winner against the Hurricanes off that insane feed and work by Aleksander Barkov. And like you said, 8-year extension kicks in this year, because he signed that extension after opening night last year, which was really cool, if you remember. Like, the game ended, Panthers beat the Bruins, post-game Carter's like, yeah, extension, 8 more years, which is great. But Doug, speaking of extensions, moving down the list, Sam Bennett just got his 8-year deal, Mr. Conn Smythe. But going back to the regular season, 51 points, a career high in 76 games, 25 goals, 26 assists. To me, the number that jumps out isn't the career high 51 or the 25 goals. It's the 76 games he played, most as a Panther in a season for him, because we say it's not his fault. With the game he plays, he's going to miss time. You're going to get banged up being Sam Bennett and throwing those hits and being physical. But this past season did a great job staying healthy. Still at 145 hits, face-off percentage around 46, 47. So right, that's fine for a 2C. Not everyone's Aleksander Barkov, but you move to the playoffs, Doug. 22 points, 15 goals, 12 of those goals on the road, an NHL record. 5 goals in 6 games against the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final. Conn Smythe, it was him or Brad Marchand, both deserved it. Sam Bennett gets it, which is awesome. And I thought, honestly, the whole team deserved the Conn Smythe. But I remember I asked him about that, just kind of being basically so many guys could have won it, but you won it, just kind of representing the group. And he was so appreciative of that. But this was kind of, this playoff run, as good as he's been ever since he's been here in the playoffs, this was kind of the playoff run where the entire NHL said Sam Bennett's the man. We all want Sam Bennett, but he stayed with the Panthers, Doug, 8 years, which is great. And he's going to keep being a huge part of this team. But what kind of stood out to you about Benny this past year?
Well, his postseason run was historic. We talk about Matthew Tkachuk kind of being the embodiment of what this Panthers team is all about. There is maybe nobody who's more a part of the team DNA than Sam Bennett is, but his playoff run was historic. 15 goals got him into really exclusive company. Who's been able to do that in a single playoff run? But the other thing with Sam Bennett, the playoff Sam moniker, fitting that he now has a playoff MVP award on his mantle or wherever he keeps his.
It's a lot easier
awards.
to be playoff Sam when you have 2 cups and a consummate.
And it's going to be fun. That's now that's a pretty cool thing now, 20, 30 years down the road. A kid's going to be looking back, seeing the list of Conn Smythe winners, and Sam Bennett's name's going to be on there. And you can say, oh, yeah, they used to call that guy Playoff Sam. Even before he won the Conn Smythe, they called him Playoff Sam. And then he won the Conn Smythe, and they really called him Playoff Sam. So it's fitting that he has that award.
Yeah, what just kind of just Nostradamus level predictions there for Sam. He was playoff Sam at
he was playoff Sam in Calgary.
Like 19, 20 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for Sam Bennett, I mean, there's not much else you can say because the numbers really do speak for themselves. But he's a guy moving forward, Doug. We've kind of talked about this with the other guys. Is what is the ideal version of Sam Bennett? And to me, it's a guy that's right up there near the top of the team in hits for forwards. He's 25 goals this past season, 25 goals, 50 points. To me, that's a great regular season for him every year with the hits. Then you get into the playoffs, and playoff Sam just does playoff Sam things. That's all I'm asking for Sam Bennett every year, and that's a great player to have. It's a player, like I said, so many teams went into this offseason as their number one target being Sam Bennett, and they didn't get him. And that we talked about that being another benefit for the Panthers. Not only is he staying, but he's not playing for a lot of other teams that wanted him.
I'm going to go ahead and guess there were teams out there saying, there are probably teams in April and May saying, oh, there's no way they're going to be able to sign all those guys. But if we can get that guy, changes everything. Changes everything. And,
things are going to be different for me now.
That was a weird thing to say. Kramer was running that test drive car out of gas. Sam Bennett, though, you mentioned the 76 games played. I love the 76 games played, but as you pointed to, when you play that rough and tumble style, you might get banged up a time or two during the year. We've seen now all the more reason. You have the ability with the depth that this Panthers team has to be cautious. If a guy needs a night off, if a guy needs to heal at the end, which the Panthers had a few guys that needed that down the stretch, you have the ability to make sure that he's ready and 100% for game one. And, proved it again here. 22 points in 23 playoff games. He's playoff Sam for a reason, and congratulations again to him on that Conn Smythe trophy that he now has. So that takes us to one more name, Jameson.
Yep. From a guy that's not playoff Lundy or playoff Anton, but has a ton of playoff experience, Anton Lundell, who's already got 77 playoff games at 23 years old, Doug, in 4 seasons in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, safe to say the Panthers are going to make the playoffs next year. So round 1 next year, we're going to be talking about Anton Lundell potentially. He needs 5 playoff games to equal another season. Of hockey, if you will.
And I remember when he skated in his 75th playoff game, the stat was like, I think he was only the 4th ever player to skate in that many playoff games before they turned 24. So he's doing historic things for a guy his age and a guy that keeps getting better every year. You look back at this year, 17 goals, 28 assists, 45 points in 79 games. Another guy that's always available for the Panthers, knock on wood. But career high in points just by one, that 45. He's a guy that I think, even though he's the 3C, even though he doesn't get as many minutes or opportunities, he's a guy that in that 3C spot is a guy you could say, if he scores 20 goals and gives you 50 points in a year as a 3C, which is incredible production from your 3C, but he could do it. He's that good, especially now that him and Etu, obviously we know about that chemistry, but it seems like coming up in this season, you imagine Brad Marchand's going to be back on that line. I really look forward to seeing what he does this upcoming season. I think it could be another career breakout year. But Doug, to me, what once again stands out for Lundy is 110 hits this past season. His previous career high was 61. He's finding that physical edge in his game. He's really getting out there chasing the puck down. He's a total puck hound now. 53% in the faceoff circle as a guy that's not even 24. We talk about how hard that is.
That comes with age. Yeah.
That comes with age, and he's another guy that does get those tough matchups. When teams try to get their 1C away from Barkov and away from Sam Bennett, they get Lundy, and Lundy does a great job. And then, this past season, 16 minutes, 43 seconds average time on ice per game. That was a new career high, so he's also getting more responsibility, and he's flourishing. So he's a guy that I think is already one of the top young players in the NHL, but he's going to get better every year. And I think it was last year Paul Maurice told us, I have no idea what Anton Lundell is going to be, but I'm excited to find out because every year he gets better at something.
But he sees him as a guy that can drive a line now, and Paul Maurice has talked about it before as well, that as a rookie, Anton Lundell had 18 goals. So the offensive upside is there. And the Panthers that season, that was the year before Paul Maurice arrived, they were playing a little bit different style, a style that lent itself to maybe erring on the side of, or it lent itself to more offensive opportunities. And Anton Lundell had 18 goals as a rookie, but he's reformatted his game since then, become a great two-way centerman. And I think what really stands out, Jameson, for Anton Lundell, he only had 6 points on the power play last year out of the 45 points. So a lot of shorthanded and 5-on-5 damage. But in the playoffs, 18 points in 23 games, which is kind of a point per game ratio that might align more with what you see moving forward for Anton Lundell. No power play points. So 18 points, none on the power play for Anton Lundell in the playoffs, shows the point production ability he has, because playoff points, folks, that's those points are not to devalue regular season numbers, but playoff points come a little bit harder earned. You're doing it against teams that get better and better every round and tougher to play against every single round.
Yeah, and one other thing too about his just playoff stats is plus 19 in the playoffs this year.
He and Brad Marchand and Netu Luostarin Waddle, again, that line pushed the Panthers over the top in the playoffs.
Plus 19, that's insane. Insane for the playoffs. So Anton's a guy that I think you and I we both just love talking to. He's a great guy. Another guy locked up to a long-term deal, and another guy that I think is going to get better every year. And Doug, as we talk about, kind of close the
one last on Anton Lundell, you're starting to see it get tossed around, and I don't have the the proper accounts to cite, but you just see various. If you're like me, your Instagram algorithm probably throws you a bunch of just hockey infographics from all different places, and they're generally just people's opinion a lot of times, or an outlet's opinion collectively or something like that. But you're starting to see Anton Lundell's name tossed around on some of the lists of, most savvy contract, best contract, most team-friendly contract in the league, because, and hey, he's being paid handsomely for a guy at his age with some good term on his deal. But that tells you that people around North America are starting to see what the Panthers are getting out of this guy at such a young age, and what they're going to continue getting out of him on a nice contract, as he is still nowhere near his prime years yet.
And we talk about X factors for the Panthers and kind of how they built this back-to-back Stanley Cup champion. And, I think not enough credit, but we still do give credit to the fact that Bill Zito did nail his first ever draft pick as a Panther, picking Lundy 12th overall in 2020. I don't want to know what the world looks like if that pick doesn't land, because what he was able to provide this team on that, entry-level contract for the length of it, and now on a very good contract coming out of that, you can't overstate how important that is to have a guy of his caliber at that number in your 3C spot for the Panthers. So, for Lundy, a guy, once again though, Doug, when Barkey does miss a couple games, or when Benny does miss a couple games, Lundy's at the point now, we've seen it this past year, where he looks great in the top six too. Like, he can do that role for as long as you need it, which is awesome.
That's 20. If we did a 2020 redraft, that would be an interesting one, because the two guys who've played the most playoff games from that draft are Anton Lundell and Seth Jarvis, and they went back-to-back at 12 and 13 in that draft. 12 and 13. You're telling me that there were 11 guys better than those two?
Yeah, we'll do a redraft here at some point. But just looking at it now, there's already like 6 guys ahead of them. I'm definitely not taking over them. So we'll see. But Doug, like I said, we're coming to the end here of this particular breakdown. Next episode, we'll do the rest of the forwards. Talk probably a little bit less about each one, just because they don't have the insane stats that a lot of these guys do. But once again, I'll hammer home that the guys we went over, the cream of the crop for the Panthers, top 6 scorers, none of them went crazy this past year, and it was enough for the Panthers. Obviously, in the playoffs, everyone went crazy, but in the regular season, it's the recipe. It's the recipe for the Panthers, and they're going to have it again this year, where everyone just do your job, share the load, spread out the offense. We'll get second or third in the Atlantic, that's fine. If they win the Atlantic, that's fine too, but it doesn't matter. All they got to do is just get there once again, and this team has so many good guys to help a team just weather a regular 82-game regular season.
Yeah, you want banners in the rafters, but there are certain banners that you want a little bit more than other banners. So we'll see what we'll see. Like you said, the Panthers could go into this, and they probably are going to go into this year as the favorite to win the Atlantic. But we'll have plenty of time to get to our preseason predictions and everything like that. And literally, the Panthers will have the same recipe. Potential to run out the exact same lineup from Game 6. We'll see how things play out, but there is the potential for that to take place when the season begins. So, again, that was part one of breaking down the forwards here on Territory Talk, the top 6 scorers. We're going to get into more of the great depth the Panthers have coming up in the next edition of Territory Talk. In the meantime, at Doug Plagens, at Jameson Coop, send along your questions, your inquiries, anything you want to bring to the table, and maybe we'll get to that in an upcoming episode. We haven't done a full-on mailbag episode, and maybe that's something we do hit on during the off-season here at some point in time. Is kind of an appropriate time.
Yeah, we'll get a guest on here too soon. We'll bother somebody.
Yep.
Interrupt their summer.
We're pretty bothersome individuals. When I think of us, I think of bothersome.
Someone right now is sitting somewhere on a beach enjoying their offseason, not knowing that they're about to get a call from Doug and Jameson.
Or somebody is sitting on a beach somewhere just thinking about how much we bother them. Those two annoying individuals want me to go on their podcast again.
I think that's why so many guys resign, though. They're like, I just don't want to familiarize myself with a new team podcast.
Yeah.
It's a big lift.
Just want to go talk territorially.
I got a comfort with territory talk, they say.
Everybody does by now, I think. We've been around. How many episodes is this? Do you have the count?
300 something. It's a lot.
300 something. All right. I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Territory Talk podcast. Episode number 300 something. Presented as always by Baptist Health, the official sports medicine provider of the Florida Panthers. For Jameson Olive, I am Doug Plagens. We'll talk more Panthers forwards on our next installment. This has been the Territory Talk podcast. We'll talk to you next time.